Hello and welcome back to Wolfeei, because today we're going to be looking at some blockwars hot takes. Warning! I will guaranteed get mad in this video because I've read through some things and look, there are some things that people have an opinion about that, sure, you can have an opinion. Me getting mad doesn't mean your opinion is invalid, it means I disagree. The main reason why I'm giving a warning that I will probably get a little bit angry in this video is because it's the same thing every single time, and it's the same type of feedback every single time, and it's the same lack of understanding every single time. And at some point, you know, they say that it's the drop of water that makes the bucket overflow. We're getting to that point. All right, we're getting to that point. There's other reasons as well. Okay. I also, nobody in particular is going to be at fault here, right? It's just a conglomerate opinion sometimes. So let's get through some hot takes. It's mostly this post. I'll get to that in a bit. Either way, hot takes posted today. What are some hot takes you guys have about blockwars? If you listen, we don't judge. Also, don't be toxic, please. I listen. I will judge. Don't worry. I'm judging because I can do that. First off, most of you don't understand what blockwars even is. I'm being serious whenever I see most wanted newcomers and 70% mainly Minecraft just icks me. I know that it'd be cool to see some MCC players in, but honestly, that's not the identity of blockwars right now. Blockwars are a variety streamer Minecraft, so we'll see mostly see variety streamers in. Yeah, this is true. I don't think that's a super hot take. I kind of have already given my 2 cents regarding that many times over however long it's been. I think a lot of people understand or know what blockwars is. They just aren't willing to accept what blockwars is. One thing that is a little disappointing is that the same people who ask blockwars to, be a bit more competitive or maybe have more Minecrafters or etc., 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 are the same people who ask for Minecraft events to be more unique, which obviously you can assume an event with more Minecraft people would be the least unique approach blockwars can take. Blockwars' identity is being more variety focused. The most iconic people in blockwars are, for the most part, or more so, the most iconic part of the roster within blockwars is going to be the variety crowd. That's going to be the standout compared to every other event in terms of who's participating actively, right? That's just factually correct. You can't be like, the most special part of the roster is Fruit Berries, because Fruit plays other events, right? It's not like he's going to be the token blockwars participant. Obviously, I understand like a Feinberg is going to be a standout in terms of a high skill player that people will gravitate towards. I'm not saying that's only variety people, but for the most part, the people that are going to stand out the most, the people that are going to pique the most interest with being in the roster is that variety crowd. So that makes sense, right? Second, not really a hot take, but like where are we standing on this whole Dazzler thing? I know recently appeared in a dream video with Jess, Cheap, Ant Venom, Red Velvet, BTMC, Feinberg. So has his reputation gone up, or like said the same? I can't really comment on this too much. I wouldn't expect Daz to make an appearance in blockwars anytime soon. Not because he's necessarily like a bad person or anything. It just doesn't really make sense. He's in the same category, right, as like a Silver not really being able to be added, because Silver's also really good at the game. And as much as I understand that people might want these people in, it might feel like, oh, because anything could be balanced, surely these people could be added. That is not the case, because right now, blockwars, one of the main issues with player management is the abundance of high-skill players that signs up on a consistent basis and the frequency at which I have to bench them. And it makes people upset, justifiably so, but I cannot solve that problem by any means. Especially adding more people is just going to make that problem even worse, right? So that can't be fixed. Applies to Dazzler, applies to anyone. Silver, potentially even Bob Blue, because he's been doing really good in other events too. Applies to everybody. Same with other HG members, etc. So, anyways, continuing forward. Tomb Titans and Trailblazers aren't boring games to watch, no matter if you're watching the PvP of a good player or a bad player. Both PvPs are fun. Sure, it depends on how you approach it. I think Tomb Titans is kind of in the same boat as SOT. I know that these games are not the same quality, and I do not think that these games are the same quality at all. No, SOT is one of the best Minecraft games of all time. Tomb Titans is not. That's just factually correct. However, we're not going to pretend like people have always said SOT was really fun to watch. There's plenty of people who don't like watching Sands of Time because they just think it's boring. And that applies to Tomb Titans too. Even with playing to an extent, that also applies. You don't really hear it or see it much from the MCC players, but I hear from testers that a lot of them aren't really interested in SOT. Not a lot, as in like the majority of testers, but from the people I know and I've spoken to, they said that they're not really that interested in playing it, which is totally fine. Trailblazers, it depends. I think Trailblazers is just a fun little movement, but it's for the same reason why I don't really like watching Parkour Warrior. Sometimes watching people do a parkour course or movement course, etc., isn't that fun. Sometimes it's great. Watching Nair get a record by like 150 points difference from second place is awesome. That's sick. Seeing people maybe, unexpectedly be really good at one specific type of movement is great. Seeing maybe just a regular, like a VTuber actually be able to compete in parkour to an extent is cool. But not everyone's going to like it. So I don't think that's necessarily a super hot take. But I understand that there are people that are going to say that. I think Tomb Titans is more a hot take. Trailblazers maybe not as much. But yes, sure. Next up, Dazznorth can never join Blockwars because of the fact that he's good. He would definitely be the same tier as Fine after a few events. Blockwars just cannot have another type of player like that. That is correct. Facts. That's true. That is just true. Further, moving along. The Minecraft community requesting VTubers just to join a Minecraft isn't that surprising. That being said, can KFC Clash in Blockwars would be fire? It's not surprising because I know that the majority of the Reddit on Blockwars is going to be the Minecraft audience. I know on the MCC Reddit, a lot of the Redditors are Life Series and Hermit watchers, which is why when there's a Life Series or Hermitcraft related post, those will get a little bit more attention. I assume a portion of that audience is on here as well, whether that's from watching me or whether that's from being involved with Minecraft events in general. And that's just what you should expect. That's why there were like 6 Hermits on that top 31 newcomer list. And that makes sense, right? I'm not surprised. I'm not upset with that at all. That makes sense. That should be expected. Sure, I would love to see the audience for Block Wars develop and understand that that's not realistic to expect, and that, maybe having a majority wish list of newcomers that is a variety of people would make a bit more sense, would be a bit better. But I'm not surprised. I cannot be mad at that because that makes sense. I think that's fine. That's okay. Next up, I dislike Shockwave. I know it's a different type of finale game to both be different and to maybe allow newer players to have a chance in something less Minecraft-esque, but it almost feels too different from the rest of Block Wars. I don't know if too different from the rest of Block Wars makes sense, considering some people think it's like almost the same as Extraction, but sure. I'm not a fan of how anticlimactic it can feel. I wrote in Lost an essay where I described a lot of flaws with the game, one of which being how the game can be over before it's over, where all members of a team are paralyzed, leaving the other team usually with a 100% victory rate. It gives an aspect of awkwardness when that happens. I think this is a situation where when you compare Block Wars' situation with finales compared to other events, you can kind of understand why that difficulty exists. Obviously, one thing is Dodgebolt cannot exist as a finale game in another event. Dodgebolt is the best finale in the Minecraft event scene, and it's going to be just MCC's thing. No other event can really make a game that is the same. That isn't really possible. Block Wars' finale is like not the same at all, but it is somewhat comparable because it has one-shot bows in it, right? That's half of the gameplay from Dodgebolt is the one-shot bows. That kind of applies to Shockwave as well, although it functions a little bit differently. It's incorporated a little bit differently. So, sure. If you compare it to like PB's finale is Extraction. Besides extracting, the majority gameplay from Extraction is PB's finale. Not saying that they copied, because I think PB's is first, right? That came first. It's just coincidentally that they both coexist. But hypothetically, if we wanted a finale like theirs, we can't, because we already have that game in the roster. It's one of the more beloved games in the roster. We cannot make that a finale. Furthermore, actually, one more, so that's kind of it, right? That's the problem that we're dealing with there. I think it would be, we're completely fine without the placing bomb charge thing. If it were more like Meltdown, it would be more fun, I think, but I definitely understand it also has to be its own thing. I think that type of feedback comes maybe from a lack of experience with non-Minecraft game modes, because if you have watched CSGO or Valorant content, VCT, pro play in general, you'll understand why having a bomb or a charge is actually a vital aspect of the game. It's super important. It's a core part of the game. So yeah, you can't really remove it, because that doesn't work. At that point, also, there's not really an incentive to to like actually actively play. It would incentivize being able to camp corners because you're just at that point, right? If you don't have a bomb, nothing incentivizes you to have to push or have to attack. Right now with a bomb, if you don't place the bomb in a certain amount of time, you lose, right? You can't win the round. So that is an incentive to at least do something. Once the bomb is planted, the other team then has to be like, okay, now we have a time limit to do something or else we're screwed, we lose. Remove the bomb, that incentive to attack or to defend is gone. Because the defenders can just pick a corner, pick an angle, and just camp it indefinitely. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. And the attackers could do the same or are screwed. Nobody really has to move. You need the bomb to incentivize people to move, be active, and for a round to progress. Yeah, someone mentions here that it's like a very important gameplay mechanic, so yeah. And someone here says, my main problem with Struck was that the map's lighting is too dark. That can be easily improved. The problem is that, yeah, no, it could be improved. That just should be able to be improved for the most part. I miss Bridges. I always liked it as a finale. I don't think that's a hot take. A lot of people have given that opinion. However, it should be obvious why Bridges doesn't exist. I think there's another hot take that will be written down below as well as to why Bridges, or as someone who says Bridges should come back. I don't think Bridges is a bad finale at all. As a standalone, like, game mode, not a bad thing. Within Block Wars, with a trend towards lower comp, it definitely is. One thing that as a viewer you might not understand, that as an event host I very much understand, is that you usually should appeal to the lower or middle tier player in your roster rather than the higher tier player in your roster, because understand this, if I make an event that appeals to the lower tier player of the roster, the lower tier player of the roster will be happy. The slightly better players will probably be happy too, because for the most part, it's not going to be unenjoyable for them to play. It probably just means that things are either a little bit more simplified, a little bit more accessible, etc., right? So it's almost a net positive going for something that appeals to the lower end of your roster, the weaker part of your roster. Bridges is a game that appeals to the higher tier of your roster. Obviously the Feinbergs and the Fruitberries and the Purples, they're going to be really good at Bridges. But the problem there is, the reason that they're going to be really good at Bridges is because it rewards high skill. That means people with lower skill are not able to, fully gravitate towards this type of game mode, and they're going to have a worse experience. So now understand, right? I appeal to the lower crowd. The higher crowd still has an okay time. They aren't going to have a bad time because it's not impossible for them to compete. Vice versa, appeal to the higher crowd, the lower crowd can no longer compete. That means part of the roster cannot participate. That's horrible. That's a bad thing. So that's why Bridges can't exist. Very simple explanation. Another reason is because at the time that Bridges existed, Mayhem's finale was Bridges, like almost the same thing, and having two events with the same finale was not good, right? That shouldn't exist. That's not a good thing. Next up, they should bring Construction back. It was one of Block Wars' best games. I don't think that's a hot take at all. I think it's a very popular opinion. I've said this a few times in the past. Bringing back games, making new games is hard. Keep in mind that Construction being brought back is the equivalent of making a new game mode, because it's a new code base, right? It's not like we can just grab the old code, plug it into the new system, and in a week it's going to work. There's a lot of attention that goes into making another game, or making a new game, bringing a game back in the sense of remaking a game, essentially, right? So there's a lot of effort that goes into it. It takes time. There's other priorities that we have. It'll happen probably eventually. I don't know when, but probably eventually. Just not soon, because we have other things that we need to focus on. So let's continue. I don't enjoy watching Extraction that much. It's not a very interesting concept to me. That's fine. Everybody has their preference. I think it's generally something that will appeal to a lot of people, but not everyone's going to enjoy it, so that's fine. Having the majority of the roster, and especially the ones with higher viewership, being variety creators is unsustainable because most of them don't really care about Minecraft that much, let alone the event. Okay, interesting. You're not wrong that the variety crowd is going to be a little bit less caring about an event that they play in than a Minecrafter audience. However, let me make it very clear that I assume what you would suggest to do here is to appeal to a more popular part of the Minecraft audience. That's not realistic. We cannot convince the MCC players, because that's the popular Minecraft audience, we cannot convince them to also play Block Wars. A lot of them aren't interested. We haven't asked, but I can just understand and assume that a lot of them wouldn't want to actively, consistently play. That's just not really up there, that's not in their general interests. Variety crowd, there is no event that appeals to them. Block Wars currently does, or more so, besides Block Wars, no event appeals to the variety crowd, right? MCC does to some, because that's, the one event that they play in, but to a lot of variety creators, there's nothing that is catered towards them. We have something that's catered towards them now with Block Wars, and that's why we go for them. We have a good amount of people actively involved in signing up, etc. One thing that's a little bit different with variety creators versus Minecraft creators is that they have a different understanding of how events work. A lot of, in general with streaming, etc., signups don't exist. You just have an event and you get invited or you don't. So a lot of them are down to play, but only think that they can be playing if they get invited. So a lot of them won't sign up because they don't know that you can sign up. And even if we tell them that you can sign up, they're not used to being able to sign up. So that's a bit of a different thing, a different issue that exists with a variety crowd. That's just how that works. Next up, Shockwave is a terrible finale, and I've always disagreed with the events, and especially Wolf's view about the range PvP being way better and more fair than melee PvP, and I'll die on the hill. So, okay. Let me be very clear. This is one thing that I am mad about, because when you make a claim that melee PvP, or that range PvP is not way better or more fair than melee PvP, you need to explain why. You can have this opinion, and that's okay, but I cannot listen to your feedback if you don't explain why. Why is melee PvP better than ranged PvP? Explain. If you don't explain, I can't use the feedback. That's how testing works. Sure, maybe you're not a tester, maybe you're not involved with testing, but that's how that works. I cannot take this feedback because you're not explaining why this is a problem. You're just saying, I don't like it, I like this. Why? Because if I'm just implementing melee PvP because you say I like it more, then I don't know why I did that. I'll just say like, well, this person asked for it. Everyone's gonna be like, but what? So, I don't know. Your opinion, I can't disagree with your opinion. I mean, I guess I could. You already pointed out that you don't agree with my view on range PvP being way better and more fair than melee PvP. I 100% think that's the case. 1,000% think that's the case. I think it's obviously the case. Ranged PvP and combat in Block Wars is more comparable to how other forms of combat work in other games besides Minecraft. It's the easiest to grasp because it's the most comparable. The only thing that may be a little bit tricky is the crossbow, because people might not be used to having a one charge, long recharge thing and then shooting it in quick succession, right? But that's something that you have to get used to. Melee PvP is complex. Especially going up against really high skill players, you are running into an absolute brick wall. They know how to S-tap and crit, like crit and combo and strafe, etc. If you're going into an event with no prep, just trying to play for fun, you're screwed. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do in that situation? With a range thing, you understand, I have a bow shoots, right? Easy. I have a sword. Half the variety people still spam click. They don't know that you're not supposed to spam click. That's not obvious. That's not clear. So saying melee PvP is way better and more fair than range PvP makes no sense, because melee PvP is so much less intuitive than range PvP. So much less intuitive. So that's my take. Next up. I don't think these are hot takes, but Block Wars is getting flooded by VTubers. Now, don't get me wrong, I like VTubers, I watch some of them, but there's a time where most newcomers are just VTubers. That's, I guess, but like, what's the problem? Why are VTubers an issue? What's the problem? Just being disrespectful to the VTubers? I don't know. Like, they like VTubers, but like, I don't know, what's the problem? I don't think that's an issue. I think that it makes Block Wars more fun. They say that they watch some of them, but there's a time when most of the newcomers are VTubers. Who would you want to see added instead? You might have ideas of people in mind that you think are better to be added to Block Wars, but in the most common instance, those people probably aren't realistic to be added over the people that we do add. Also, A lot of the people that are being added in terms of VTubers are friends of Anthos or people that we just look at in terms of, we have contact with them and we think this would be fun. This would be a fun person to have in the roster, which half the time at least is the case. Majority of the time is just the case. Very, very, very rare occasion somebody, not VTuber, just in general, somebody will be added that we just don't think was a great addition. But for the most part, everybody who gets added is a good addition to the roster. They're someone who either fits in, is nice to have as a guest appearance every now and then, and it's just a nice person to have in the roster. So I don't think claiming that we're getting flooded by VTubers is accurate, especially because, as being pointed out here, there's not that many VTubers in the roster. You don't complain about the lifesteal members being in. You don't complain about the high skill people being in. You just complain about the VTubers being in. Not this person specifically, but some of the blockwars audience in general. And it's a little confusing. It's like, well, there's not that many, just a few. Yeah, rookies you're gonna have a lot, but that's because that's kind of the type of players you should expect to be in rookies. VTubers are they make one of the easiest people to convince to play because they're the most open to doing stuff. And rookies is just the most accessible type of audience or type of gameplay for them to play. That's a very good introduction to the event. So I think, sure, there's a lot of VTubers compared to other events, an insane amount, because at most there's one in other events, right? Blockwars has more than one, but claiming that it's like a flood or more so, as much as you didn't like complain about it, but more so kind of pointed it out, kind of implies that there's some level of issue with it. I don't think that's a problem at all. It's just different. But it should have never been removed as a finale. The Bridges has some issues like they said previously and is not skill player friendly, but it just really fits as a finale where the whole premise is to know which team actually deserves to win, by how skilled they actually are, or who has more skills than just luck-based games. Oh my god. I'm gonna be so... You're actually gonna piss me off. What about Shockwave is luck-based? Please explain. Please explain how Shockwave is luck-based, because this implies that it's luck-based. What about Shockwave is luck-based? Please explain to me how that is a luck-based game. Shockwave is actually skill-based, not luck-based. You just maybe don't like the skill. I don't understand. I just don't understand how you could claim it's a luck-based. Whatever. Someone here in the replies also mentions it. So here. So the event is too skill-focused, but at the same time, you acknowledge that the Bridges was too... Oh, wait, hold up. Here. Blockers is all about skills, and that doesn't really help with the newcomers or variety YouTubers, players who just occasionally play Minecraft. What about Blockers is all about skills? Unless luck-based games refers to like Blitz Hunt and Spleef, what is all about skills in Block Wars? You have Battle, Race, Trailblazers, that's skill-based. There's probably something I'm forgetting about. I mean, everything has a level of skill, but all about skills kind of implies that it's like Pandora's box, right? Which is not true. That doesn't mean that I don't think PB is good, right? I just want to clarify because I feel like some people were going to assume that means that I'm dissing PB. That's just a different approach to events. That's totally fine. So, I don't know. Yes, this person points it out here. They're like, you said the event's too skill-focused, but at the same time, you acknowledge the Bridges is way too skill-focused and still want it back. Or could you watch some Butterfrag PvPs of the game? Shockwave is by no means perfect, but in the 6th edition it was played. It has probably already had more than twice as many memorable moments from lower-skilled players as Bridges had in its 11 events in Block or CC. That is true. That is correct. That is fully correct. I love the VTubers in it. Yeah, it's not that I hate them. Sure, let them play. I like some of them too. My point is there's too many or more and more VTubers are getting added. I think a lot of the VTubers that are being added, but not many... consistently play. Generally, you're getting around 6 or 7 individual events, which isn't a crazy amount, rookies being the exception. Yeah, I mean, like, sure. Like, this person says that, like, they don't hate them, but there's too many, and I'm like, why are the VTubers the problem? I don't understand why they're the problem. Is it because they're too different of a player for you? I don't know what the issue is. This is not this specific person, but I feel like this was a pretty big point in the past with Block Wars, where there was just flat-out disrespect towards VTubers for no reason. Is it because they're different? Just a different type of creator that maybe people aren't comfortable with or don't like the best? Sure, but why are we being disrespectful? I don't know. I think it's very silly, especially if you're someone who watches me. You'll understand that some of the VTubers are like some of the most fun players in the roster. Like, some of my favorite people that we have in Block Wars are VTubers. I think they're great. I don't understand why people have an issue with it. I don't know. Maybe you just haven't explored that type of content. Maybe you haven't actually put in the effort to watch them. Not this person specifically, because they said that they watch some of them, all right? Just in general, I feel like some people complain about the VTubers, but then don't give them the chance, and I think that's very silly. I don't understand that. It's like some people, and this is just in general because I've heard it. Some people will be like, I don't like the Hermits in MCC, and I'm like, but have you ever watched the Hermits? Have you ever tried? Have you given them the chance? And then they'll be like, no, not really. So why do you not like them? What's the problem? You haven't even given them a chance. I don't even what I don't get it. It just doesn't click. It doesn't click. Anyways, moving on. I suspect there are practical reasons for it, but I agree with one, broader variety in the variety of players would be nice. This is so much easier said than done. So much easier said than done. You don't even understand how hard it is to get different types of variety people in the roster. It is difficult. We haven't tried that much, but keep in mind there has to be a level of cohesiveness, consistency, etc. with how you invite people to a roster, and you cannot expect us to just randomly know everybody and randomly be able to pick anybody out of thin air and put them in the roster. That is very unrealistic. Not this person specifically. I understand. It would be nice if there was a bit more variety in the types of variety players. But what do you want us to do? Magically make Iron Mouse appear? Well, I guess you don't want VTubers, so not Iron Mouse. Valkyrie, fucking Saikudo. Well, too many OTV members now. Okay, get Shroud. Like, how? Explain how I'm supposed to do that. How? I don't understand. Anyways. It needs another melee game, and battle should be benched and construction back, please, and they should do a high comp event after 4 or 5 events. I don't think that's a hot take at all. Another melee game, common feedback. We're going to get into it here because I'm already getting heated a little bit, but this one's going to piss me off. Not this person specifically being like, wrong or anything. It's more that repeat feedback is annoying, especially with the consistency at which, the frequency at which it comes out. And then the audience response partially to it is annoying, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Yeah, another melee game is fine. Battle should be benched more often. Sure, Battle Overplayed is crazy. Battle Overplayed is crazy. This is the most benched game in blockwars history. How is it overplayed? I don't know. Construction back, please. Sure, should do a higher comp event after 4 or 5 events. We already have kind of done that, and they never go over well. I'm not opposed to doing a slightly more high comp event every now and then, but generally it feels like they're not the most well received. There's always going to be 1 or 2 teams that have a bad time. Everyone else is fine, but there's going to be always 1 or 2 teams like at the bottom that are going to just kind of feel meh about the event, and it means that we either lose players or have people go from actively playing to infrequently playing, which I don't want. I missed the blockwars top 10 and mini movies, the shorts, and now just focus on origins. Hey man, hey man, everyone's a volunteer. We can't expect all the editors to just have the infinite time in the world to be able to make videos. But I agree, it'd be nice to have them back. Next post, Blockers Nitpicks. This one's older. This is a more recent post. This was posted how long ago? 10 hours ago. This was 21 hours ago. Blockers Nitpicks. The reason in the intro why I said that I was going to be mad in this video, by the way, is because when I look at Blockwars community posts compared to any other event, I feel like consistently it is always a very loud minority of people being either very like I guess nitpicky, right, of Blockwars. There's always things that are being pointed out, and it's always like, I love Blockwars, and I appreciate that you love Blockwars, but I feel like always there's a consistent amount of people giving the same feedback, the same nitpicks. You can understand from my standpoint, when already so much effort goes into trying to make this event better and better, and understanding that there are issues that need to be fixed, you can't expect us within a month span of time for all these changes that I've mostly heard before, or most of these suggestions mostly heard before, to just be done. That doesn't really make sense, right? That doesn't really make sense. And then, we hear the same shit over and over, and it's like, well, not this. Okay, well, I'll get into it in a little bit. But there's a lot of people that give the same feedback, and I'm just like, man, like, what do you want us to do? I don't understand. What do you want us to do? What do you want us to do, man? I don't get it. Either way, let's read the post. I love blockers as an event, but there are a few things that I don't really understand why they are the way they are, or that could easily be improved. So instead of making a lot of small posts, I'm going to put everything into one big one. Shockwave 2 times the rival system is often very confusing for first-time players trying it, and it feels needlessly complicated. It would be much more intuitive to simply allow players to right-click the body to revive instead of interacting with the hovering heart. My feedback on this was as follows. Rival system feedback is fine, but no option is going to be objectively the best. Different non-Minecraft games use different systems, and people only get used to them from playing the game frequently. This is the same situation. That is true. That is true. That is just true, right? Yeah, there's going to be... There's going to be... what's it called? There's going to be different mechanics in different games that people are used to from playing those games. It doesn't mean that one of them is necessarily better than the other. It just means, because the main reason feedback is given here is because some people have an issue understanding it. If that's your first time of you seeing the revival system, sure. Even if it was just a lying body and you have to right-click the body, that's not necessarily most intuitive. People aren't going to know that you have to do that. Some people might hold shift because they think they have to res like that because other games have holding shift to res. Some people might think right-clicking. Some people might think, do I have to have a separate item to res? It's because every game has a different way of reviving, different way of approaching different mechanics. And this is another example exactly like that. Either way, let's continue. The Blockwars multiplier is a bit silly in its current state, but I already saw Wolfei's comment on that topic in a video, so I'll skip it. Yep, we can move along. There's a severe lack of sword PvP in Blockwars, which I don't like. Melee PvP is a staple of Minecraft gameplay, and nearly every other Minecraft event includes it, except for Blockwars, where we sometimes go entire events without it because battle gets benched. I don't think the skill ceiling for melee PvP is too high to justify its complete omission, and it's sometimes even lower skilled players, something even lower skilled players can enjoy. For example, in Rookies 3, many players on Finemrex's team were disappointed by the lack of sword PvP when they found out there was none. This is one of the main things that I was upset about, because this is something I hear a lot, and I think that a lot of the reasoning behind this feedback is not because in a previous post what was claimed a lack of understanding how Blockwars works, but a lack of accepting how Blockwars works. People want events to stand out and be unique. Blockwars does something different. People complain and say it should be like everything else. That doesn't add up. That does not add up. I don't understand that at all. I don't understand how people want to see the same approach to these different events, but then want different approaches from different events at the same time. How do you expect us to do the same thing as other events and different things as other events at the same time, like in terms of changes? So some things that are currently different should be the same, and some things that are currently the same should be different, but what should be different? Because now we had a different multiplier, people didn't like it. Okay, we have a different approach to what games are included, people don't like it. Now what? We have already different team sizes. We can't really change that anymore. We already have different players. And even people don't like the different players. We can't change that anymore. What do you want us to do? What do you want us to do? What do you want from Blockwars? You want it to just be MCC2? Like, I don't understand. I just don't get it. Sometimes I just don't understand what people actually want. What do you want from Blockwars? What actually, though? Actually, please, because I'm so curious what actually is wanted. Because I feel like everything we do, and I should actually clarify before I get too deep into my criticism. I know a lot of people really appreciate how Blockwars currently works, and I'm really appreciative of that, but understand that it's always the loud minority that gets the win in terms of feedback and attention. That's just how it works. That's always going to be the case. Look at general media. Look at general media. A plane crashes, you'll hear about it for 2 days. A plane lands, who cares, right? That's the prime example. So, anyways. Also, I'll just look at my feedback. Claiming that there's a severe lack of melee PvP is questionable. Sure, there isn't a lot of melee PvP, but by no means is it required for melee PvP to be very prevalent in an event. By this, I mean adding one game, sure, but claiming there's a severe lack, which I explain here, a severe lack implies more than one extra melee PvP game is needed, which means you'd have Battle, another melee PvP game, and then at least one more, which means you'd have 3, which is ridiculous. That's way too many. You do not need 3. You want us to add SG and Skywars? Cool. Anyways, don't care. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. but yeah, they said there's sorry, but yeah, by no means is it required to be very prevalent. Using the argument that finds rookie teammates is a bit silly because that's a sample size of one where that's come up, which is true. It's literally the only time I've heard weaker tier players say that they think there should be more melee PvP or more PvP in general. Literally the only time. Every other instance, it's been people actually asking for less PvP, which is the case here. I've seen more players complain about too much PvP than not enough PvP, including Rage. This is true. You can't disagree with that because that's the feedback from other people. That is factually correct. From speaking to players, some people think there's too much PvP, because one thing that's very different with Block Wars and a different type of player base is a different perspective on how a game roster comes together. For example, Spleef is seen as a PvP game. You might not agree. You might think, no, Spleef is not a PvP game. A lot of people think Spleef is a PvP game because you are playing player versus player in the same arena and eliminating people. That is PvP. You don't have to kill them, but you eliminate them. That's PvP. So you can understand how if we add more PvP, and people currently already think there's too much PvP, more PvP in the sense of 2 melee PvP games, what is being suggested, that would be a horrible idea. Not a net positive, is what I say here, because there's already people who think there's too much. So if you get that, some people think there's too much right now. Some people think there's too little right now. There's no way to make everybody happy. That's the facts. That's the realistic approach. That's the realistic result of this type of feedback. Which is why I am a lot bit upset at the consistent feedback of melee PvP should be added, because people don't take the time to understand why that currently isn't the case. They only assume, I know why it's not, or at least I know there's not enough PvP. I think there should be more PvP because every other event has more PvP, but they don't think about why there is less PvP. I've just explained it to you. People have a different perspective on what games actually are. For example, Spleef is seen as a PvP game by some. So hopefully that explains it to an extent why things are the way they are right now, because you might not agree, and that's fine. But you should also understand that as much as you might not agree with me, that doesn't mean I have to agree with you. I disagree with the people that say there should be that much more PvP in Block Wars, that there's a severe lack, because that would not help the event at all. That would be a horrible idea to add a lot more melee PvP to Block Wars. That there is a severe lack that should be fixed. That is not a good idea. Furthermore, they give feedback where they say, this isn't necessarily a criticism of Block Wars, but I know its direction is to cater more to variety creators and reduce the comp of each event, which I understand and I'm fine with. However, I do hope that the comp balancing stops at some point before every event ends up balanced like a Rookies event. There's never going to be a situation where the regular Block Wars will be able to be as low comp as Rookies. I've explained a little bit in the past how like Rookies invites work, and not expecting, but if we were to actually want to do a Rookies on a monthly basis, that would be very mentally taxing, and trying to get that many people invited to a roster is very hard. So I don't think that's ever going to be the case. Also, Block Wars has not been trending lower and lower comp. It's been trending lower comp consistently. The issue is that the ability to actually get to this lower comp roster has been inconsistent. I mentioned that in my feedback here as well. There isn't a continuation of lower and lower comp, but more so an inconsistency in reaching the goal of lower comp. See the difference between Block Wars 14, which was a very recent event that's a bit stronger, Block Wars 15, a recent event that's a bit more middle tier, and then Block Wars 11, which is a somewhat recent event that was a lot more lower comp. And as you can see, the lowest comp one was the longest time ago. The highest comp one was a month ago, and then the middle tier is right now. So you can see that there's no consistency though, right? It's not like consistently going up or consistently going down. It's a zigzag, because we cannot expect everybody to be available at every time, be interested to play every time, etc. Right? That's just not realistic. So we're not going to have a monthly Rookies essentially. That's not going to happen, because also if we were to have the regular events be Rookies level of comp, what would Rookies even be at that point? That would make a Rookies absolutely obsolete, right? Next up, battle heal points originally sounded like a cool idea, but I think the system is flawed, along with all battle support kits in general. I don't think battle support kits being flawed in general is a bad bit of feedback, but I'll explain a bit. The amount of armor you have and longevity you get from healing in exchange for only slightly weaker main weapons is staggeringly strong. This has led to top players prioritizing these kits for themselves instead of giving them to weaker players, which only inflates their score even more due to heal points. Sure. There is a level of this being correct. I do think that saying heal points is the flaw is bad. I don't think that's the problem. I think it's the balancing of the kits in general. I'll get into that right now. The issue you bring up regarding battle heal points does not fully relate to heal points, but rather the fairy kit. Fairy kit's just a bit too strong because it heals itself automatically, making one-on-one fights difficult to win for the other player, that is. Heal points are very important in battle because it probably rewards players for the effort they put in. This is true, because keep in mind, who suggested heal points to be added to battle? Wasn't the staff, it were the players. The players, May specifically, put forward this idea of, hey, we should have heal points in battle. If damage points get rewarded, heal points should be awarded too. That takes a lot of effort. That's skill. I was like, you know what? You're right. Yeah, that should be rewarded because that is skill. That actually takes effort. It is something that should be rewarded. Why should a healer put in the effort to consistently pay attention and heal their teammates if they don't get rewarded for it, right? You only keep your teammates alive? Cool. So your job on the team is to score no points individually and just heal your teammates so they can deal more damage? That makes no sense. You should get rewarded as well for putting in the effort individually, because individually you did well for healing your teammate consistently. If you've played Overwatch, you'll understand. If you don't play games like Overwatch or games that have consistent healing, you wouldn't understand. But if you play a game like Overwatch, you'll understand that there's an immense amount of value in having a good support player. Having a support player that ends the game with like 20,000 healing is fantastic, phenomenal. Having a support player that does okay, maybe in terms of kills, and gets like 6,000 healing, horrible player. Absolute dog shit. I'm just going to be completely for real. And that was me sometimes because I didn't understand. I've played enough Overwatch in the past to understand how, there's a lot of value in having that type of player. So you need to reward healing in one way or another. Support kits are flawed because there's no way for us to properly give weaker players a defensive and supportive kit without making that kit also appealing for high skill players. We almost had this down, but with battle getting played more and more, we've seen a bit more of a trend for higher skill players to grab the support kits, etc. This is an issue with battle that cannot be fully fixed without a major rework of the game, which at this point in time is not worth the risk and effort, which is factually correct. Why would we put in the effort to completely overhaul how battle and its kits and whatever works at this current moment in time when we already know battle isn't a popular game in the roster? It's like people suggesting MCC to rework survival games. Why would MCC allocate their resources and time, that is pretty rare and valuable, on survival games when they already know survival games isn't good? Why would you spend so much time trying to make a bad game better when you could just make a new game mode? That's the conclusion. That's the conclusion on this point. That's the conclusion. Why would we put in so much effort to try to quote-unquote fix battle, because for all we know, the suggestions and the feedback couldn't even be helpful. Maybe the feedback isn't correct, right? That's another thing. It's a risk. Why would you put in all that effort just for a game that we know isn't going to be that prevalent in blockwars in the long term, right? In the long-term future, I just don't think that makes sense. So yeah. Also, balancing in battle is very difficult because buffing or nerfing one kit could have a ripple effect on multiple other kits. For example, right now, let's say that Skeleton is considered one of the best kits, which I think actually is the case, right? Skeleton is considered the best PvP kit, the best damage kit. We nerf Skeleton, what happens? People no longer play Skeleton, go to different kits. But now that Skeleton's bad, suddenly the previous number 2 is broken. It's OP. It's the best kit in the entire event. You want us to consistently buff, nerf every single kit, every single event? Everyone's just going to be confused. The last time Skeleton was good, why is it not good anymore? That's not going to be intuitive at all. So you can't expect us to do balancing on a consistent basis. This is what we used to do in Series 2. Did not go over super well. The battle kits have pretty much not been touched for the most part since Blockwars 11, and they've been okay. Yeah, I can fully agree and understand. There is a meta. You can't expect every single kit, all 11 or 12 kits, to be the exact same, or like 10 kits to be the exact same in terms of skill and in value. That just isn't realistic. So we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening, right? We'll see. Also, they suggested separate damage pools for ranged and melee combat because they said that melee combat is broken. That's unnecessarily complicated. Ranged kits should just be nerfed instead, but not too drastically to make them useless. That is true. I think if in any instance where you want to make the argument that ranged combat is too valuable or too good in battle, you don't look at the points. You look at the ranged damage and the ranged kits. You look at how can you make them more fair. Oh, maybe, you know, Skeleton shouldn't have infinite arrows or whatever it has, or maybe shouldn't, maybe the crossbow kit, the Scout shouldn't have the best thing every single time. Sure, right, whatever. But the points are not the issue, because then what you would have is you would have unintuitive and unfair scoring. Why, when someone, you know, does one, or let's say a third of your gameplay is melee hits and 2/3 of your gameplay is ranged hits, and you get equal points for both? That doesn't make sense. You spent most of your round dealing the same amount of damage, or not the same. 2/3 of the damage you deal is from range, and 1/3 of the damage you deal is from melee. Why would you get the same points for both of that when one of them is way more than the other, right? That doesn't make sense. So that's why. That's your explanation. You can't do separate damage pools and make one worth less than the other. That's not fair. That's not intuitive. You can make healing worth less than damage, because right now healing I think is worth like less than half of what the damage pool gives. I could be wrong. I don't remember the exact numbers. I think that's fair. Healing should be rewarded. It shouldn't be the only way that scoring is relevant. It should be rewarded, and it does get rewarded. It's not going to be the determiner. You're not going to get the best points in the world from just healing. No, but like it should be valuable. It should have value. So that's it. That's kind of mostly it. I think that's mostly it in terms of the hot takes and feedback that I have. My apologies for maybe yelling. Because I'm passionate about doing blockwars stuff, and now at some point seeing the same feedback and talking about the same feedback over and over and over gets a little bit infuriating. No, absolutely zero flack or specific, you know, anger towards any of the people who made these posts. I understand why these posts were made. It's more that like I don't like seeing the same stuff over and over. I also feel like, and this applies to other situations too, if I sugarcoat my feedback and response every single time, people just aren't going to understand the severity and the, you know, the reasoning behind it. They're not going to listen. If I do approach it like I did this time and just actually like be a bit louder and be a bit more vocal, maybe it'll actually, you know, hit. Maybe you'll understand why I feel a certain way. Maybe if I put a bit more emotion in it, it'll be a bit more clear. Anyways, 74 minutes of yapping. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later. Goodbye.